Well, hello and welcome to David Chenery from OSP. Thank you so much for joining me for this Fresh Montgomery series looking into sustainability. David, welcome. If there is anybody out there who doesn't know who you are or what you do or why sustainability is so important, here's your moment to tell them.
Thanks, Katie. Our company is Object Space Place, in case you're wondering what the OSP stands for. We are focused on providing architecture, interiors and branding with an emphasis on sustainable hospitality design. So working with restaurants and pubs and bars and hotels, looking at how they can make their physical spaces more sustainable.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that, that brief but succinct explanation. Obviously, I try not to use the C word, but we do have to talk about COVID, and there's been a massive focus now on safety within hospitality. How do you think that the focus on sustainability has been affected because of that change and because of the COVID situation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you highlight safety, and I think you're right. There's the concern around hygiene. I think there's an argument that a sustainable business is merely one that is still in business in a year's time. And clearly people have been scrambling to make sure they can reopen in a way that's safe enough for their customers to come back in enough numbers. So it is natural that some of the concerns around sustainable materials and sourcing have gone by the wayside a little bit as people naturally revert to more short-term thinking. So there's things like, in terms of consumables, people going away from reusable cups and back to disposable cups and disposable materials and menus and all of that. I think there are enough people who are bringing that back now, so hopefully that won't be too big a problem. But I do have a bit of a concern that a lot of these acrylic screens and vinyl graphics and stickers we've got everywhere, a lot of that has been done without thinking how that material is going to be disposed of at the end of its life. And I did a webinar for the SRA, Sustainable Restaurant Association, a few months ago during lockdown, where we looked at how you could do acrylic screens in a better way, or how you can do vinyl graphics in a better way. So if anyone wants to see that, have a look on our blog on our website, and there's some examples of how you can do it with recycled materials. And I think the core really is trying to do it in a way that's in tune with your brand DNA. And I think that's where people who are doing it really well have understood what they're doing.
And so, speaking about people who were doing it really well, and I'll come on to the future in a moment, but prior to coronavirus ruining everything for everyone, who was doing it well, and what was working in your mind?
Yeah, I think there's some people that some people listening to this may find surprising. So people like Nando's have been incredibly focused on sustainability for a long time, and really leading the way with a lot of stuff they do within their estate. And then on the higher end, you've got chefs like Chantel Nicholson from Treadwell's and Douglas McMaster at Silo, who's a zero food waste restaurant, and even Adam Handling with his Restaurants the Frog. On the pub side, there's quite a few. There's one called the Roebuck again in London Bridge area, and one called Buxton as well, which actually won the SRA award last year for the open right category because of all the work they did around restoring the building the right way, minimizing carbon emissions. So there are some interesting case studies of people who have been putting a big focus on this over the last few years. But yeah, those would be the highlights, I suppose.
Great, thank you. There's a couple that I didn't know of, so I will definitely check those out. The focus on sustainability, which in my mind, just as a mere researcher and managing director of a company, I know it was something that was really on our minds, and it was a buzzword that was floating around a lot in 2019 and the beginning of 2020. And a few people have sort of questioned me and said, well, does that go away now? And I said, no, it doesn't go away. The focus just becomes slightly shifted, and perhaps people will have less money to spend, so that sustainability has to be more effective for them when they do bring it in. Do you think that the focus will return to where it was this time last year? And what does sustainability look like for hospitality in 2021?
I think it definitely will, because I don't think sustainability is a trend as much as it's more of a realization that this thing is coming. And you can't there's not going to be a bigger trend than that. So I definitely think there's also this really small company you might have heard of called Brewdog, who've made this massive announcement about going carbon negative because they met David Attenborough and they've seen the light, and they're doing incredible stuff at the speed of Brewdog, which is obviously super fast. So no, I don't think it's going anywhere. And I do think it ties into, I remember we had a chat right at the beginning of lockdown where I talked about this book called The Psychology of Pandemics. And one of the outputs from that guy, Stephen Taylor, was that what normally happens at the end of a pandemic is you have a big uptick in altruism within society because we've all pulled together and defeated this foe, in theory. And I would expect that to come through both in companies built on social purpose and sustainability and climate change. So no, I do not think it's going to go away. I think it's going to come back with a vengeance. You're right. How that is done is going to be a big question, and how people measure that and how they can make that contribution is a big question. But yeah, 100%, it is here to stay until we magically solve climate change.
That's good to hear. We've done some research ourselves over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, so pre and post COVID, and I've been amazed at how the focus on what the average consumer wants to know about the brands that they're engaging with, how that focus has gone much more over to what charity work are they doing, what are they doing for the environment, how do they affect my health, what are they doing about climate change, and so sustainability falls in with that. And in my mind, it's no less important just because there's a global pandemic on. In fact, it's made a lot of people stop in their tracks and look at the brands that they're engaging with and think, are they doing the right thing? Do I want to be associated with that brand? And that's especially true when you look at the younger generation as well, of course, because they're just so much more conscious of it. When we look at different areas of restaurant design, are there any real areas where we have to think about sustainability before other things?
I mean, we've been looking at this for quite a while now, so the answer I would obviously give is no, all of it, but that's not very helpful in helping someone get into it. I do think there is one of the easier ways to get into quantifying it is to start looking at energy efficiency.
Okay.
So you can look at how efficient your lighting is. If all of your lighting is not LED in your restaurant, then you're missing a trick because it's going to save you a lot of running costs. You can reduce the average cost by something like 8% of your electricity bill if you do that. And then you can look at how energy efficient your HVAC system is, your kitchen extract, whether you're doing heat exchange. There's much more advanced versions, but that's certainly an easy way in that your finance director can sign off on because you can see it on a spreadsheet. So yeah, energy efficiency, because that's also a kind of permanently ongoing cost. Kind of the embodied energy and carbon in a piece of joinery can be a little bit more difficult for someone to feel the tangible results from when they're looking at it.
I'll ask you afterwards whether I should be doing all of this with my newly bought motorhome and my own house, but let's park that for now, pun intended. What are your top tips? So if I'm a restaurateur or a publican or a bar owner, and I really want to focus on sustainability, but I need some easy and inexpensive wins. Apart from the lighting, what else can I be doing?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would take a little step back and say the quick wins won't be the same for everyone. So first thing I would do is I would go and look at the Sustainable Restaurant Association's website, because you might be looking at actually the amount you can do by simply changing your menu or the food you serve or the way you do it. You could make a bigger impact than doing something with the physical interior design. So I definitely look at the SRA first. Again, also there's another blog on our website about how to design a sustainable restaurant, which will list out like 10, 15 different areas, whether you're looking at water efficiency, for example. The toilets are a massive area of using water, second only to the kitchen. So low flush toilets, aerated taps, whether using hand dryers versus paper towels. If you look through all of those, you will see some that definitely will apply to a particular restaurant more than another. And then there's obviously things like upcycling, the carbon footprint of getting a chair that already exists versus one that is made from virgin materials. There's a big difference there. So anytime you can reuse something, then the better. And I think I'm also quite fond of the line I've heard recently that the most sustainable restaurant you have is the one that's already there. So you shouldn't be tempted to sort of throw things out for the sake of it.
Yeah.
You know, you need to really think about making the most of what you've got, and improving that, rather than the easy path of sort of chuck something away and bring something new in.
Okay, and then if I was possibly your dream client, where I say I'm totally redesigning, I'm totally rethinking, money is no object, then where do we start?
Well, I think we're starting a research project moment called the Restorative Restaurant. So we're trying to get to ones that can give more than they take, as we define it. And we're mainly looking at how you design to avoid waste. So that means designing everything for disassembly, designing with life in mind. So when a chair is going to be finished in 10 years, can you take it apart and actually use those components in different ways? Again, looking at energy efficiency, embodied carbon, operational carbon, flexibility as well, designing so that this space can flex. So maybe in 5 years' time, you know, your cafe wants to become a hybrid co-working space. You need to be able to adjust those things if you want to have the most sustainable space, because a sustainable one should be able to adjust over its lifetime. Not, unfortunately, you know, most restaurant lifespan is only 5 years. Yeah. So if that is going to be the case, because either they fail or they upgrade and change their kind of look to respond to customer needs, that has to be built into the design from the start. And I think, so our project, Restorative Restaurant, really is based around the principles of the circular economy. So if you are going to try and start one from scratch and say, I want this to be the most sustainable, then you should look at circular economy, because that's the only way that we can get a genuinely sustainable system. Because so things like going for carbon neutral is really impressive and it's brilliant, and if the world did it, it would be a better place. But it's a bit like counting calories. Like, you can count calories, but you don't necessarily have, that's not going to mean you have a healthy lifestyle. You know, you can still, I could eat 1,500 calories a day, but it could be chocolate and I do no exercise and I'm not healthy, but my calories are low. You can have a low carbon footprint, but you could treat your staff really bad. You could be destroying biodiversity. You could be polluting the water. So it's, you know, when you really get into it, it is a much more complex system that needs to be adjusted. And you can only address that if you're doing a big fundamental design project.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. I've got one final question for you, and that is really the future of sustainability. Do we see anybody out there right this moment that's doing it as well? I mean, we've talked about people from pre-COVID. Is there anything else that anyone else that you'd like to direct us to see, or any other little tips and hints that you'd like to share?
I mean, I think the biggest one, I mean, it has to be Brewdog. Even the last week, and I know I've already mentioned it, but I think they're doing that thing at the scale and the speed that they do, which is having a huge impact. And I think the important thing with them is the fact it will raise it up everybody else's priority list, because they'll see something that is going on there. So I think, looking at what they're doing, and I know I've just sort of knocked carbon measurement there, but it's still arguably the most useful metric we have in terms of single metric for doing stuff. So I think Brewdog are on a.
And of course, I think, you know, what you just mentioned there about it being a lot to do with speed. There's one thing that this pandemic has taught us, is that it doesn't need to take 3 years to put in a particular technological advancement, or it doesn't need to take 2 years for us to agree on a sustainability program. I think that I've had so many conversations with operators who've said, well, we were going to do that in 2022. And I thought, how long did it take you? 2 weeks. So, you know, I think if something good can come out of a pandemic, then certainly it's that idea that we can be more flexible and that we can work quicker and we can achieve things quicker. And especially when we all work together, which I think we've been doing a lot more since COVID-19 started. So, David, thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much for getting online with me. And I really hope to see you in the real world. Maybe you can take me around some sustainable restaurants when you're next in town and we both feel safe enough to do so.
Sounds good. Take care.
Thanks, David.